It has been confirmed that Frank will receive a rework in the next update, and I am so excited for this, as most people, because he hasn't been changed in freaking 3 years and he absolutely sucks. So today I'm gonna tell everything that I would do in that rework. Hope you enjoy. So my main goal with this rework, it is to make sure that not walking with Frank, it's more of an option that grants you some sort of boost rather than something mandatory like how he is right now. So after this rework, the idea is that he becomes something closer to what Mandy looks right now. So with that being said, his new passive would be Focus. After standing still for 0.45 seconds, Frank would focus, and now his attack would have an extra 3 tiles of range, and the width would be decreased from 65 degrees to 50 degrees. So it would be kinda similar to M's attack, but with a slight bit more of range. But still, speaking of range, his basic attack range would be decreased from 6 tiles to 4.67, which is the same as Ash's range. And Frank no longer needs to stand still to attack. So the main idea is, if an assassin runs up into him, he can just walk away and still smashing the hammer, but with a lot less range. But if Frank decides to stand still and, well, focus, his attack would have a lot more range and would allow him to deal with longer range units, which I feel like it is a very decent change overall. Next, I still want to talk about a second passive, which would be a headset reaction. Even with everything, Frank's super just simply does not allow him to deal at all with assassins. Most of the tanks' supers have some way to deal with a lot of aggression, and Frank just simply cannot do that. So to fix that, keeping his super relatively the same almost, I'm gonna talk about that in a second. Now he would have a circle around him, kinda like Lily's or Buzz, but instead of charging up his super, it would charge a bar that when filled, that bar would take 5 seconds to charge, by the way. So when that bar is filled, after Frank receiving 1 damage, either it's because of a poison or a direct attack, whatever it is, he will release a small explosion, kinda like M's gadget, that would deal 600 damage. It would obviously knock back, and on top of that, it would give a 600 HP shield to Frank, and while that shield is active, Frank is immune to knockback, slows, and stuns. So kinda making as well his first gadget a bit of a passive, because I honestly feel like he just needs it. Obviously, the fact that you do not need to stand still while attacking would greatly improve Frank. You still have the super that I don't want to change that much. So this passive should allow Frank to survive a really deadly encounter against an assassin. And one important detail is that bar cannot charge if you already have the shield. So in most scenarios, you could not pop out 2 of those explosions against the same assassin attacking you. It would be way too hard to actually manage to do so. Now let's talk about his super, and this is kinda where some nerfs to his kit start to appear. So starting off with the good stuff, the range of the super would be increased from 7 tiles to 7.67, which would be the same as his basic attack while focus. On top of that, the damage would be increased from 2480, which is very weird, like his basic attack is the same damage as the super. What? His super windup would also be reduced, I cannot tell exactly by how much, but around 33% to 50%, so that it's a lot faster. And that's because the effect of the super will be completely changed. Instead of just a 2-second stun on the whole thing, now the super will just push all of the people to the very end of the super range and then slow them down for 1 second. So kinda of a different version of a Gale super. Very similar, but it also has that slow at the end. This is just to make Frank slightly weaker, because obviously with all of the previous change, he would be really strong. And on top of that, something very important to say is that his HP would obviously be reduced from 4,000 HP, actually 14,000 HP, Jesus, to 12,000 HP. So he would have, if I'm correct, the same HP as El Primo. And these would just make sure that he would not be overly broken. Now let's talk about star powers and gadgets, a new mythic gear and a new hypercharge, because we already got leaked that Frank would receive a hypercharge. So his first star power, I would actually not changing that much, I just want a tiny nerf. The duration would be reduced from 12 seconds to 10 seconds. Just a simple nerf. I feel like with all of the changes, Frank would benefit so much from that damage increase, and that would probably be way too much. His new second star power will be over focus. While Frank is standing still, his headset bar would charge up 50% as effectively. That would help him out in case the enemy assassins would actually be kinda smart and just stay away from Frank, and that would help him out to defend himself from assassins. His new first gadget would be Self Break. You instantly get all of your bars filled. So you instantly get that bonus range, which obviously would not change much, but it's still a nice tiny extra. And the headset bar would instantly be filled as well. So this is just a gadget that would be very helpful, especially if you're getting really bullied by one assassin that just keeps coming after you. You pop off that gadget and you get that extra explosion, push them away. And his new second gadget, it is Pushing Sound. Your next basic attack, instead of just pulling and dealing 100 bonus damage, which would be stupidly broken, now it would just be that your next attack would just push people to the end of their range. So it would be like a weaker version of his new super, which would be really cool to see, honestly. Now let's talk about his new mythic gear, which would be Strong Pose. While Frank is standing still, he receives 10% less damage and deals 10% more damage. So on top of the bonus range, you would also receive 10% less damage, which I don't think would be a really strong mythic gear, but it would be a nice extra to have. And now talking about the hypercharge, which would be Blast of Sound. In case you don't know already, in my previous hypercharge video, I am a lot in favor of abilities over just random stat increases, so do not go crazy if it is very complex. Number 1. 20% bonus damage and 10% bonus shield. No bonus speed at all. And while hypercharge, your bars would be always filling up. So your headset bar would fill up in 2.5 seconds, half the duration that it usually needs. And there is no need for anyone to stand close to you, the bar is just always filling up, so no assassin can approach you. And on top of that, you would always have the bonus range active. And this also means that while hypercharge, your mythic gear would always be active as well. The hypercharge makes it so that you would kinda just stand still, but you're not actually, you would just get the benefits from doing so. And whenever your shield from the headset thing breaks, so after the explosion you get the shield, and when that shield breaks, the hypercharge duration gets extended by 1 second. So this also makes it easier to really just keep the hypercharge. And at the end of the super would also shoot 5 projectiles, which would be kind of shockwaves of sound, dealing 50% the damage of the super, and those projectiles would just deal a small push and a 1 second slow. It would kinda be like Piper's first gadget, but on your hyper super, and it would bounce off of walls as well. So imagine these like 5 BB bubbles that would deal a small push and a small slow. But to not be way too crazy, these sound waves would have half the range of BB's bubbles. So it will still be a lot of range because you also have to consider the actual super range. So I feel like this would be a very strong hypercharge. And the rate of the hypercharge would be 30%. So it would take you 3.33 supers to get, which Frank has a really cycling super, and with the bonus range, I feel like you make everything a lot easier, but 4 supers just seems way too much, so 30% rate seems pretty fair in my opinion. And there you have it. That's exactly how I would rework Frank. Obviously, these could have a couple of mistakes. Maybe it would be way too broken, maybe it would be way too weaker. I don't really have any way to test it, so please do not harass me for doing these changes, please. If you have any idea of how you would like Frank to be reworked, write in the comments down below. Trust me, I will read them. And I'll see you on the next video.